I'm going to present the second consortium, ALERRT, the African Coalition for Epidemic Research, Response and Training. So it's ALERRT with two R's. Yes, there. So, like Francine and Pandora, we responded to the same EDCTP call, which was for a network on research and clinical management of patients in poverty-related disease epidemics in sub-Saharan Africa. And EDCTP worked with other European partners and found additional funds and funded both consortia, which is great. So that's a double benefit. So we've really focused on the research and clinical management of patients and epidemic infections. So ALERRT's a multidisciplinary consortium that's really aiming at building a patient-centered clinical research network with a focus on epidemic infections, with the overall aim of reducing the public health and socio-economic impact of disease outbreaks. We signed the grant agreement on 1st of December, and we have a website that went active just this week. So it's www.alert.global. Unfortunately, there's a United States Rapid Response Armed sort of training group that has the same acronym with two R's. So that's not us. So if you see a picture of a guy with a gun, that's the wrong ALERRT. So we're really focused on bedside work, both observational studies. So we want to look at natural history, clinical endpoints for designing clinical trials, pathogenesis, increasing biological understanding of emerging infections, high-threat pathogens, so that we can inform bench science, so the development of new diagnostics, vaccines and drugs. And then the other way, from bench back to the bedside, conducting clinical studies, both evaluating diagnostics but also clinical trials. And we see that as a benefit in two directions. One, it benefits the public health response, because if we have a better understanding of the disease clinical epidemiology, endpoints, duration of infectivity, infectious tissues, pathogenesis, that really helps inform the appropriate public health response. But also we want to inform the R&D blueprint. So the R&D blueprint from WHO and CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, which are investing heavily in roadmaps and pipelines for new diagnostics, drugs and vaccines. We want to feed into those networks, because they really need a good understanding and biological standards, etc., from these emerging infections to be able to complete their pipeline. So this is where we were. This is what I've called the epidemic curve of ambition. You recognise an epidemic curve, but I've done this for what happens with research in epidemics. Suddenly there's a big epidemic, there's a load of ideas, there's a few protocols, almost no patients are enrolled, and there's virtually no evidence that comes out of any of the studies, because they all start too late. And that's a real epidemic curve, because this is the 2009 pandemic, and on the left is the number of patients that were supposed to be enrolled in protocols that were registered. So it's about 6,000 patients were supposed to be entered into trials. In the end, less than 1,500 were actually enrolled, and less than 200 patients enrolled in trials were published. And it resulted in no evidence, and there's no improvements in the treatments of severe influenza from that curve of aspiration to evidence. So we're really wanting to just focus on, moving forward the ideas, getting them into protocols and enrolling patients, so we can sort of improve the evidence base. We're 21 partner organisations from 13 countries. So that's 9 African and 4 European. And that's the geographic distribution. There's a bit of overlap with Pandora, but actually there's many areas that are different, so there's quite a lot of potential synergy to cover the entire sort of sub-region. But we haven't gone into South Africa at all. And there's the European partners there. And we're linked through with ICAR, Wanatam and Cantam as well, so trying to build on and support the EDCTP networks of excellence where we can. We had the launch meeting this weekend, so we thought this meeting here was a great opportunity to bring everyone together. So we pushed forward, and it stimulated us to launch quickly. So we launched at the weekend, and everyone gave up their Saturday and Sunday very, very thankfully. So and it went very well. And also Francesco from Pandora came, because we really are going to try and align the two networks as much as we can. And Francesco gave a talk about the Pandora network. We have 7 work packages. I won't go through these at all, but the first objective is establishing a clinical research sites for doing clinical trials, so that's the clinical research platform work package. The second is a laboratory network to provide support to the clinical studies, so that's the lab network. The third is scalable GCP compliant data management for clinical trial standard, which is the third. The fourth is about alleviating administrative, regulatory and ethical bottlenecks, because part of the problem is not scientific ideas or even capacity sometimes, but actually it being just too slow in getting the ethical and regulatory approvals in place. Fifth is about training and development, training and capacity development. Number 6 is social sciences. It's about, we've called it impact, because we want to make sure that there's impact both in community engagement in the science and in accepting the results, but also to policymakers. So that's impact both ways, community-based and policy-facing. And then 7th is coordination and management. So we've kind of divided them into two groups. So we've got the platform for research, preparedness and response, which are the 3 integrated work packages of clinical research, lab, and ICT and data management, and they'll be working together to set up the sort of basically a clinical trials network. And the second group is the sort of impact and operational readiness, which is social sciences, so that we can understand community concerns and implement trials quickly. That we have the operational readiness in terms of both logistics, mobile research capacity, but also a sort of response plan of how we will work with other players, like how we will work with Africa CDC, AFRO, GoOn, Pandora, so that we're not all fighting over the same patients, but we're actually working together to improve the public health response. We've gone for a tiered approach to capacity development, because there are strong centres and there are weaker centres, and what we want to do is have a strong capacity development component. So we've identified we will have principal clinical sites and lab sites, and they will be required to be associated with developing and formative, which are at sort of lower levels of development, and the aim will be to bring the formative and developing sites up to principal sites. And so with Palmer in Cantam and Trudy Lang in the Global Health Network, we'll be working on these sort of communities of practice that bring together the principal, developing and formative sites to have a sort of network where we can have mentoring across the sites to try and bring up the capabilities. These are so each work package has a lead and co-lead. You can see this on the website. So a mixture of African with some Europeans leading and co-leading across the different work packages. And most of them were attending the meeting at the weekend and are here this week. Governance, we have a General Assembly, which is all of the partner networks are represented, and they're the ultimate decision-making body. Below them is an exec committee, which is all the work package leads and co-leads, which are, their responsibility is more operational. It's about ensuring delivery of the project. And then linked to that, we have an international advisory board. And I just wanted to finish with an anecdote from my time in Vietnam. I was in Vietnam for 10 years, and we responded to quite a lot of outbreaks. And I was walking on the beach with one of my Vietnamese collaborators, and we were discussing why some of the partners and some of the institutions were successful in responding to outbreaks and doing research, and some were not. And she likened them to different sorts of vehicles in the terrible traffic of Vietnam. I've anonymised them to A, B, C. You're free to guess who the institutions or the partners are. But she said A is like a motorbike. It's small, fast and flexible, so it can get to its destination very quickly. B is like a cyclo, one of the pedal cycles, slow and a bit old-fashioned. And C is like a big car. It's too big and gets easily stuck in traffic and difficult to change direction. And I think the point was that if you're going to respond to outbreaks, you don't have much time, and you can't be too indecisive or risk-averse. You have to take risks, actually. And you have to be very flexible. You have to be able to move money from activities very quickly. So we're aiming to be the motorcycle. And we have already done some response work. So the Nigeria Lassa fever outbreak, 3 of the ALERRT members were active in that response. Bernard Noct, which is also in Pandora, they've been there for a long time working with IROA, but also INSERM and Lima were part of the response. And so they've partnered with Nigeria CDC and with WHO Blueprint to prepare a prospective patient cohort. And we're also talking with CEPI about enrolling those patients in a follow-up study for getting biological standards for vaccine development. So we had an executive committee, we've activated it, we've already put some of the ALERRT funds towards that and secured additional funding from other funders from DFID to support that work. And we're holding an ALERRT WHO ethics workshop next week in Dakar, where we've got, I think it's gone up now, Emmanuel has told me it's 50 representatives of national research ethics committees coming, of which many of them are from sub-Saharan Africa. And the focus of that workshop next week is trying to find practical ways to accelerate ethical review in emergencies using different possible techniques, including sort of multi-country review and things like that. So thank you very much.